This gaming PC is a bit different than what you've seen on the past on this channel. Probably the thickest PC that I've ever reviewed. This brand new dual chamber case design is a different approach, but it's actually a pretty good idea when you think about it. But we're gonna take you through our full experience and help you decide if it's actually a good buy in this 100% honest and unbiased review of the OriginPC Neuron 6500X. This configuration that we have here for you is spec'd out with an i9-14900K CPU and the all-new 4070 Ti Super GPU. I'm going to quickly take you through the unboxing and what's included, gaming and creator benchmarks, design and build quality, the internals, thermals, fan noise, overall ease of use, pricing breakdowns and comparing its price to performance ratios against the competition, as well as my top likes and dislikes. If you decide against this PC after anything that I say in this video, just keep watching because I'm also going to be sharing with you some alternative PCs that I recommend for every budget. I'll have links down below for all the computers that I mentioned. I guarantee that if you watch this entire video, you will know if this PC is right for you or not. But if you still have any questions after watching this entire video, just shoot me a comment, and if you're publicly subscribed, I guarantee a personal response. All right, now let's rewind back into the past real quick and check out what came in the box. Upon opening the box, we've got another smaller Origin box with a ton of extras. We've got some hard drive cables, PCIe cables, a quick installation guide for your GPU, more SATA hard drive cables, M.2 SSD locker screws, a pretty cool looking Wi-Fi antenna with a magnetic base that'll let you easily put it anywhere, an incredibly beefy power cable, a pretty helpful quick installation guide for a bunch of different types of components, some nice bribery from MSI to leave a review, and some cute little stickers. And then buried at the bottom of the box, an OriginPC t-shirt, and then on the other side, a huge mouse pad, pretty thick too. Alright, let's dive into the design of this thing. This PC is built with Corsair's new 6500X dual chamber case, and I gotta say, this PC is a gamer's dream when it comes to making things easy to modify. At 18.9 inches tall, 19.5 inches deep, and 12.9 inches wide, it definitely looks pretty beefy. I love designs like this too, where you can easily pop open the side panel to access the internals without any screws. Inside, you can see that they've included Corsair's new IQ Link fans that can connect to each other in a way that eliminates the need for each fan to be wired to the motherboard individually. We've got a whopping 10 fans in this case. The 3 on the bottom are intakes and the other 7 are exhaust fans. And the 3 at the top are actually part of our Corsair H150i LCD liquid cooling system. For those of you new to my reviews, this is the most important part of keeping your CPU cool. This CPU cooling block right here uses a liquid to transfer the heat from the CPU up through these tubes into this 360mm radiator, where the heat is then spread out and then blown out the top. To the right of our CPU, we've got our Corsair Dominator Titanium RGB DDR5 RAM at 6000 megahertz, or 6200 if you enable XMP like we did. We've got 2 sticks of 32 gigabytes for a total of 64. Way more than you would ever need for gaming, but it could come in handy for 4K editing. The most important part and most expensive part of this PC though is that GPU. And this massive one right here is the all-new PNY GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Super GPU. Just a tad smaller than our FE 4080 Super, and not nearly as cool looking as this one in my opinion. And then above and actually behind our GPU, we've got a few metal plates which actually act as heat sinks for a bunch of our M.2 SSD slots. We've got 5 total. The included drive that our operating system was installed on is a 1TB OPC approved Samsung with 6.6 gigabytes per second read and almost 5 write. The included 2TB secondary SSD in here is a super fast 2TB Samsung 990 Pro, and that one with about 7 gigabytes per second read and write. So definitely plenty of room for high-speed storage upgrading. Underneath all that, we've also got a fully accessible PCIe slot for any expansion cards you might want to add. Then swinging around to the back and removing the back panel, chamber number 2. Look how much room we've got here for activities.
So many activities!
2 bays for additional 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, and behind that we can actually access this slot right here without removing the back panel to insert 2 more 3.5-inch mechanical hard drives. Then underneath that we've got our 1200 watt Corsair RM1200X shift power supply. For the ports on the top we've got a power button, 1 USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, 4 USB-A 3.2 Gen 1s, and a 3.5mm combo audio jack. On the back, an HDMI and DisplayPort, clear CMOS and flash BIOS buttons, 8 more USB-As and 2 more USB-Cs, a 2.5G Ethernet port, connectors for your Wi-Fi antennas, and 6 high-quality audio ports. Then on the back of our 4070 Ti Super GPU, 1 HDMI and 3 display ports. For the software, the main program that you'll be using is the iQ app. In here, you've got an insane amount of customizations and options to play around with. We've got a lot of cool animations for your RGB, and as an added bonus with this one, we've also got a lot of options for that really cool CPU LCD screen. It's really great for revealing PC information like temperatures and speeds for your CPU, GPU, and fans. You can also add your own GIF animations, which is pretty cool. This time warp effect right here is a really cool new feature with these iQ Link RGB fans. It basically strobes the LEDs at the same rate that your fans are moving, which basically lets you control how fast they look like they're moving, or even make it look like the fans are spinning backwards. That's a pretty cool illusion if you ask me. You've also got cooling controls with several different fan profiles depending on if you prefer quiet fans and a hotter PC or louder fans with an extra cool PC, especially when you're doing some high intensive gaming. And then within the BIOS, there's a lot that you can fine tune even further, like boosting your RAM with XMP, or even overclocking settings if you're one of the more advanced users that really knows what you're doing. Don't mess with these settings if you have no idea what they mean, especially if a little window pops up and gives you a little warning. Just do your research first. Now, when it came to the fan noise, these were my results after testing each of the main fan profiles. In quiet mode, it was just a little over 40.7 decibels. This was one of the quietest quiet modes that we've ever seen, but things changed quite a bit when we cranked the fans up. Using the extreme performance fan profile brought the fan noise up to about 46.6 decibels. This is one of the loudest that we've heard in the studio, but as you'll see in the next section, you've got some room to crank the fans down a little bit. Now for the thermals, we ran our typical thermal imaging time lapse, and you can see that we got the normal heat buildup against the glass. And then opening up the side door, you can see that everything appears to be pretty under control. Due to there being so many fans in this case, heat gets extracted pretty quickly. The majority of my testing was spent in actual gameplay though. These were our CPU temps for several different games at 1080p for both the 4070 Ti Super and 4090 versions that we tested. Both stayed significantly below throttling limits, and as expected, the hotter 4090 version spilled over into a warmer CPU temperature. Then looking at the average temperatures across all games and comparing it to the competition, that shows this PC to have the second coolest i9 that we've ever seen. Pretty impressive that the Skytech Eclipse beat it with it having 3 less fans. And then in 4K, this chart was sorted by the GPU because high resolution gaming puts more pressure on the GPU and less on the CPU. Nothing too special here, pretty average overall, despite the hefty price tag of this PC. And the 4070 Ti version actually ran just as hot as the 4090 version. Performance and gaming benchmarks. And up next, the most important part of this review, the price to performance ratios. For Cinebench R23, which simulates its 3D rendering power, we've got a multi-core score of 35,254 and a single core score of 2,283. By the way, all rendering software can utilize multiple cores, so that's the most important score. You can see that it's pretty much as average gets when it comes to that i9 CPU's rendering capabilities. And another very helpful test for you 3D renderers is the V-Ray benchmark. And these were our CUDA RTX and overall V-Ray performance scores for the 4070 Ti Super version. Pretty impressive GPU scores, with the 4090 version coming in third overall. And the 4070 Ti Super version was right where it should be, just barely behind the lowest scoring 4080. This is an important score if you're doing a lot of high polygon 3D modeling or real-time viewport rendering and lighting. The overall V-Ray performance score is a CPU-based rendering test that demonstrates how well a PC can handle the more advanced realistic rendering that takes a lot longer to calculate. Both versions that we tested with i9s proved to be on the lower end compared to the other i9 PCs. Interesting that the version with a 4090 had a slightly lower score here. It's almost like the more powerful GPU sucked a little bit of the power out of the CPU. I highly doubt that though, because this PC has a 1200 watt power supply. And the last set of benchmarks for creatives before we get into gaming are the Puget Benchmarks. For DaVinci Resolve, we got 3453 for the top tier configuration. The Corsair Vengeance i7-500 topped the charts here. The 4070 Ti Super version of this PC held its own pretty well when comparing it to the other i9 PCs that actually had 4090s. Adobe Premiere, we got 14,347 for the top tier version. Unfortunately, Puget just changed this test, so we can't fairly compare it to the rest. For 3D Mark, which is a great benchmark used to predict a computer's overall gameability, we plugged in these overall graphic and CPU scores into our master chart, and you can see here that the 4090 version came in third overall, and the new 4070 Ti Super was again just barely below the 4080s. For those of you looking to step up your VR graphics and take them to the next level, you can see that both versions did fairly well against the competition here as well. Actual gaming benchmarks are probably what you guys care the most about though. These were our average FPS results that we got for several games at their highest preset settings at 1080p. Despite how amazing this case is and how expensive it is, we still did not beat the i7-500 here. If you don't even care to venture past this resolution, then one of these other PC configurations that I've reviewed might be a better option as they're way less expensive. This Victus by HP almost hit above 60 FPS on all games at max settings. So at more modest settings, it could be enough to get you by if you don't have a lot of money. And I'll reveal more on this in the recommendations for every budget section coming up. At 1440p, not too shabby numbers here either. Over 100 FPS in Cyberpunk at ultra graphics settings with no DLSS, that's pretty good. And then at 4K, again just barely behind the similar spec i7-500 with the same specs for the top tier version, and pretty respectable for the 4070 Ti Super configuration. But averaging all FPS from all games and comparing them to the most recent PCs that I've reviewed over the past year together, this gives you the best overall perspective on how they all stack up against each other. You can see at 1080p, both versions proved to be pretty average compared to the other PCs with similar specs around them. Pretty much the same thing at 1440p as more pressure was put on the GPUs, with the 4070 Ti Super version surpassing a couple PCs that actually had 4080s. And then at 4K gaming, kind of underperforming for the top tier version, but basically right where it should be for the lower tier. Okay, so you ready for that price? You might want to sit down for this. And as a side note, if you want to save a lot of money and build this PC yourself, I'm going to include links down below in the comments and description for all the parts of this build. At the time of this recording, the i9 4070 Ti Super version is going to cost you a whopping $4,000. Since I'm actually reviewing this PC before the release, I don't yet have the 4090 version pricing, but you can check the link down below for the current pricing once I post it. So when it comes to comparing the price to performance ratios of all the gaming pre-builds that I've tested with HD settings, we've unfortunately got the second worst price to performance ratio out of all the PCs that we've ever tested. Same thing at 1440p, with the only worst one being another OriginPC. That OriginPC with a liquid-cooled GPU was gorgeous though. And then at 4K, it stepped into first place for the worst dollar per FPS ratio that I've ever seen. I guess that's just the price you pay for lifetime tech support and getting to pick the exact components that you want. If you happen to be at an entirely different price point, these are my recommendations for every budget. I've also got affiliate links in the comments and description below for all of them, as well as tags directly on this video. At just over $3,300, the top tier Alienware Aurora R16 is actually a pretty good deal. I would only get this one if and only if you don't plan to be doing any upgrading. Alienware PCs are only for those that find modifying their PC to be a chore and tend to swap their PCs out for a completely brand new one after a few years. If you need to be under $3,000, then I would go with this i7-480 version of the CyberPower PC Gamer Supreme that we reviewed for just over $2,600. Basically the same specs as the less expensive version of this i7-500, but about $400 cheaper. Although I definitely prefer the Corsair version, this one's a pretty good option if you can't afford Corsairs. The quality of the components isn't usually as good as Corsairs, and again, they're stuck with that 1-year warranty versus Corsair's 2-year warranty. But you could also subscribe to Best Buy's Total Tech membership, and that would give you an even better 2-year coverage for about $180 a year. If $2,600 is still too much, then that Skytech Azure 2 with a 4070 Ti that I reviewed is what I recommend. Closer to a $1,500 budget, this version of the Lenovo Legion Tower 5i with a 4070, closer to $1,000, this CyberPower PC Gamer Extreme that I just reviewed with an i5 and 4060, and for under $1,000, I'd get this exact version of the Victus by HP 15L that I reviewed with a 1660 Super and i5 for just over $600. That is the bare minimum that I would get for semi-decent decent gaming at low settings. If you're coming from a console like an Xbox Series X or the PS5 and you want your graphics to at least match that, then you'll need a PC with at least a 3060, or in this case a 4060 GPU, and 16 gigabytes of RAM, and that'll bring the price up on this one to about $800. Overall, this is a great PC, and this dual chamber case is incredible. It's very future proof and extremely easy to upgrade. I do love that lifetime tech support, and many of you will appreciate the level of customizability and options you have with each component, but because of those painful price to performance ratios, I personally would rather go with a Corsair Vengeance PC at the end of the day. My favorite is still the Corsair Vengeance i8-200, and based on what I've seen, most of you seem to like the Corsair Vengeance i7-500 the best. If you do decide to purchase this PC or any of the others that I mentioned, then please remember to use my affiliate links in the comments and description below, as I get a small commission at no cost to you for every single purchase made. And it's actually a major factor in keeping this channel going and getting better and better for you. I'd also like to personally thank all of my members for their monthly support of this channel. Also make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on to stay up to date with all of my latest tech and gaming PCs. Thanks for watching, guys. I love you guys. God bless.